Malole soifua maua, malelangi mama. I'm Leone Samu, married name Tui. I was born and raised in Auckland, but my family village affiliations are, on my mum's side, Malie, Waiala, and Sefanga. And on my dad's side, Pu'apua, Tapunawa, Talelesi, Paliula. And then on my mum's side also, through my mother and my grandmother's line, we're Ngāti Kahunguniki Wairarapa. My current title is Associate Curator, Documentary Heritage, put in brackets, Pacific Collections. At Auckland Museum, my job has been to surface and make connections with the Pacific measina that's here in the research library. This research library has been around a really long time, 1860s. Lots of different kinds of books, publications, photographs and manuscript material here. Yeah, my job since January 2020, which was newly created, is to surface all this really incredible, rich Pacific content that's always been here at the research library, just never really touched or never really considered before. So it's been a real privilege since that time to be able to find things anew and then change record information and then reintroduce these items back into communities at different points. More recently, a big experience for me was being on the Pacific Collection Access Project. For Auckland Museum, that was a really key project to share more about what goes on in the museum and connecting more specific communities. And that's a whole other story, but this was the first time that the museum really saw the hunger for Pacific people's stories and connecting with measina that have always been here in the basement in collection stores. But never had a chance to host Pacific communities in the building until that time. And actually my job now actually was a spin-off from that project, because there'd be these community days where we'd bring out measina from a specific community and have an open day like on a Saturday and host and have proper food, and people were able to come and touch and look at really closely without glass. And my colleague Paula Ligao, she would bring material from the research library. She would bring photographs, rare books, things that people hadn't seen in a long time or ever, and she'd bring them and put them all out on a table. And so people would look at their taonga, the objects, and then get really excited by recognizing people in photographs that we had that have always been here in the collections. And it was Paula who said, we need a Pacific position in the research library to do a bit more of this. She advocated for my role to be created. Luckily enough, I had managers who also were able to say, yes, that's a clear need coming out of PCAPP and coming out of a lot of other really important Pacific development work at the museum. And yeah, being in this job since that time has just been like one awesome thing after another, to find something again and share it with a researcher or an artist or a community. A really important part of that was about us being able to rehouse some of our object measina, and not only rehouse but increase the information that we have. About 6,000, so almost 6,000 of these taonga through 3 years. Rehousing them, better conservation, photography, but also doing the records so that they reflected a bit more of Pacific information, knowledge. Because, bag, atso, katso, something else. There was a really important component of PCAPP was to go to knowledge holders and ask them more about these taonga that we have downstairs in the basement that are labelled bag and labelled mat and labelled house blind. And it wasn't, those conversations were really rich and never about a knowledge holder saying, that's not a bag, that's not it. It was always, they would speak lovingly because they're remembering things, they're remembering family stories, they're remembering the time when they went out with their grandfather to hunt for sharks. And they're, rattling one of the shark lures. This is how you do it. When I think of literacy or transfer of knowledge, it's always wrapped up in all this really amazing, rich material, and that's literacy as well. Well, that's knowledge, and it's just done in a different way. So how can libraries or places where we have books and resources, how can we challenge that bit? Because that bit is really important we call it community engagement, but it's more than that. It's special, it's sacred, it's deep time, because in the museum we think in terms of 100 years, 200, 100 year, you know, not just decades, but centuries. I think we're trying to be a bit more. But then Indigenous people think in terms of thousands of years, hundreds and thousands of years. So it's, I'm not articulating it very well, but there's lots of different time and space moving in those spaces going on at the same time. Knowledge holders were talking to each other, and younger, less learned people were finding out more information. It's that, the tala noa, or the talking and the really rich conversations that can happen between people. And in a community library, that's, for me, I would think that the equivalent of that is like a child comes in and they don't really know, you know, they're just hanging out, or maybe you as a librarian starts talking to them and talking to their parents, you're looking for, and then you connect a book to the child, something sparky happens. I'm calling it sparky, yeah, something sparky might happen between that book and the child, and then, you know, who knows what comes out of it. I think a library space is a place for, yeah, the sparky things to happen. You just don't know. As long as you're working in that really open-hearted way, yeah, things happen, and it's always really special.